"You are just a guest now, Eleanor." The words were spoken softly enough that no one across the table would have missed them, and politely enough that anyone hearing them later could pretend they were harmless. For a moment, the only sound in the dining room was the faint clink of crystal against silver. The massive oak table stretched beneath glowing chandeliers, surrounded by portraits of Harrison family members who had built fortunes, survived scandals, and protected this estate for generations. I sat beneath the largest chandelier in the room, my hands folded neatly in my lap, while Isabel poured wine beside my son as if she had always belonged there. David stared down at his plate. He did not defend me. He did not object. He simply adjusted his napkin and remained silent. Somehow, that silence hurt more than the words. Around us, the dinner continued. Victoria discussed an upcoming foundation event with one of the board members seated nearby. Ethan stood near the staircase, pretending to check messages on his phone while quietly watching the room. At the far end of the table, Harrison sat in his usual place wearing an old denim jacket that looked out of place among tailored suits and expensive dresses. He appeared uninterested in the conversation, but I had known him long enough to understand that appearances often lied. "We only mean that the next generation needs more responsibility," Isabel added with a pleasant smile. "You should finally be able to relax." Several people nodded. One even offered a sympathetic smile. Relax. It was a beautiful word when offered as kindness. It became something entirely different when used as a dismissal. For more than 30 years, I had attended every major family meeting, every foundation gathering, every difficult discussion that shaped the future of this family. Yet recently, invitations arrived later. Documents reached me after decisions had already been made. Conversations seemed to stop when I entered a room. Tonight was simply the first time someone had finally said it out loud. I looked around the table. Nobody appeared surprised. That realization settled heavily inside me. This was not a spontaneous insult. This was the result of something that had been developing for a long time. Isabel lifted her glass. David followed. Others joined in. A toast to the future. As crystal reflected warm light across the room, I noticed Ethan watching Isabel instead of raising his own glass. And at the far end of the table, Harrison slowly looked up from his plate. For only a second, our eyes met. His expression did not change, but something in that brief glance told me a simple truth. I was not the only person in that room who understood exactly what had just happened. The following morning, I woke earlier than usual. The estate was still quiet, wrapped in the kind of silence that only existed before servants began preparing breakfast and before family members filled the hallways with conversation. For years, I had loved those peaceful hours. That morning felt different. Isabel's words from the previous night remained with me, not because they were cruel. They were far more dangerous than that. They were accepted. As I walked through the mansion, I began noticing things I should have paid attention to months earlier. Framed photographs from recent foundation events lined the walls. In several of them, Isabel stood at the center of the group while I appeared farther back. A year ago, that would never have happened. At the time, I assumed it was coincidence. Now I was not so sure. When I entered the breakfast room, David and Isabel were already seated beside the windows overlooking the gardens. David looked tired. Isabel looked refreshed and confident. The contrast was impossible to ignore. "Good morning," I said. David offered a polite greeting before returning to his coffee. Isabel smiled warmly. "We were just discussing the board meeting next week." I waited for more. Nothing came. No invitation. No request for my opinion. No assumption that I would attend. The conversation simply continued without me. For a few moments, I sat there listening while they discussed future projects, leadership planning, and donor relations. Several times I expected David to include me. He never did. The realization settled heavily inside me. It was not that they forgot. It was that they no longer considered my involvement necessary. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the foundation offices located on the east side of the estate. A young assistant greeted me with visible surprise. "Mrs. Harrison," she said, "I did not know you were coming today." The comment was innocent, but it revealed more than she intended. My office had once been the center of activity. Now my presence felt unexpected. As I reviewed correspondence on my desk, another detail caught my attention. Several committee reports had been distributed electronically. Everyone on the leadership team had received copies. Everyone except me. I stared at the distribution list for several seconds. One missing name. Mine. By itself, it seemed small. Combined with everything else, it became impossible to dismiss. Someone was not simply stepping into a larger role. Someone was carefully moving me out of mine. And the most unsettling part was realizing how many people had quietly allowed it to happen. 3 days later, I found the first piece of evidence that convinced me my instincts had been right all along. It happened by accident. Or perhaps it only appeared to be an accident. I was walking through the east wing of the estate when I noticed Ethan sitting alone in a small sitting room near the library. Papers covered the coffee table in front of him. The moment he saw me, he gathered them together. Not quickly enough. I recognized one of the documents immediately. It was a committee roster from the Harrison Foundation. "What are you looking at?" I asked. Ethan hesitated. "Something does not make sense." That answer alone was enough to make me sit down. Ethan had always been observant. As a child, he noticed details everyone else missed. As an adult, that habit had only become stronger. He slid several pages toward me. "Look at the signatures." At first, I did not understand what he wanted me to see. Then a pattern emerged. Several committees that once reported directly to me had been reorganized over the past 18 months. New advisors had appeared. New reporting structures had been introduced. The changes seemed ordinary when viewed individually. Together, they told a different story. Most of these appointments were recommended by Isabel, Ethan said quietly. I looked through the documents again. He was right. Her name appeared repeatedly. Not in obvious ways. Not as someone demanding authority. More as someone gently helping others make decisions. The effect was the same. Influence had been spreading around her like roots beneath the surface of the ground. "There is something else," Ethan continued. He handed me another page. This one showed access requests for archived family records. Several entries caught my attention immediately. Entire boxes of historical documents had been reviewed over the past year. Some of them involved governance structures. Others involved trust agreements. One category appeared again and again. Succession planning. I felt a chill move through me. Who authorized these requests? I asked. Ethan looked uncomfortable. Most were approved through administrative channels. Everything appears legitimate. Legitimate. The word offered little comfort. Many things could be legitimate and still be dangerous. We sat in silence for several moments. Outside the window, gardeners worked among the hedges as though the world remained perfectly normal. Inside the estate, however, another reality was beginning to emerge. I thought about the missing reports, the conversations that no longer included me, the photographs, the meetings, the toast to the future. None of those moments seemed isolated anymore. They felt connected. Ethan carefully gathered the documents together. Before leaving, he paused near the doorway. "Grandmother," he said softly, "I do not think they are replacing you by accident." After he left, I remained alone with that thought. Deep down, I already knew he was right. The following weekend, I drove to the family lake house for the first time in months. The cabin sat on the edge of a quiet lake surrounded by tall pines that had stood there longer than most of the Harrison family history. Whenever life became complicated, I used to come there for clarity. That afternoon, the water reflected a gray sky, and the entire property felt suspended between seasons. I found Harrison sitting on the back porch, staring across the lake with a coffee mug in his hands. He looked exactly as he always did. Unshaven, quiet, easy to overlook. Most people in the family treated him like a relic from another era. They assumed he knew very little about what happened inside the estate. That assumption had always fascinated me. Harrison listened more than anyone I had ever known. I sat beside him and watched the water. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, I told him about the missing reports, the committee changes, and the documents Ethan had discovered. Harrison nodded occasionally, but never interrupted. When I finished, he remained silent long enough to make me wonder if he intended to respond at all. Then he said something unexpected. "People only hide things when they think nobody remembers where they came from." I turned toward him. "What does that mean?" He stared across the lake. "It means power leaves footprints. Most people spend too much time watching where it is going and not enough time looking at where it started." His answer only created more questions. Before I could ask another one, he stood and walked inside the cabin. A few moments later, he returned carrying an old leather notebook. The cover was worn with age. He placed it on the small table between us. "Look at the dates," he said. Inside were handwritten notes, meeting records, and observations going back years. Not official records. Personal ones. I flipped through the pages and immediately recognized familiar names. Board members, advisors, family associates. Several entries mentioned Isabel. Not accusations, not conclusions, observations, patterns, introductions, recommendations. Small moments that seemed meaningless alone but significant when viewed together. Harrison watched me quietly. Most people believe influence appears suddenly, he said. It does not. It grows slowly until everyone forgets there was ever another way. As the wind moved across the lake, I looked back at the notebook. For the first time, I realized someone else had been watching this story unfold long before I noticed anything was wrong. And unlike the rest of us, Harrison had kept a record of every step. When I returned to the estate, Harrison's notebook stayed with me. I spent the next 2 evenings reading every page. The more I read, the more difficult it became to dismiss what I was seeing. None of the entries contained accusations. Harrison never wrote like that. Instead, he documented patterns, dates, meetings, introductions, recommendations, small changes that seemed insignificant until they were viewed together. By the third night, one name appeared so often that it was impossible to ignore. Isabel, not because she had demanded authority, not because she had openly challenged anyone. Quite the opposite. According to Harrison's notes, she had built influence by helping people. She introduced donors to board members. She solved administrative problems. She volunteered for committees others avoided. Every action appeared generous. Every action earned trust. Over time, trust became access. Access became influence. Influence became power. The following morning, I received a call from Thomas. His voice sounded unusually serious. "I think we should meet," he said. Less than an hour later, we were sitting in his office overlooking downtown. The city skyline stretched beyond the windows while legal files covered the conference table between us. Thomas opened a folder and removed several printed records. "These requests caught my attention," he said. I examined the documents carefully. They were archive access logs. Many involved trust records, governance structures, and succession provisions. My stomach tightened. Ethan had already found similar patterns. Thomas pointed to several entries. "Most people would never notice this," he said. "Everything was requested through proper channels. Everything appears legitimate." I looked at the names attached to the requests. Again, Isabel appeared repeatedly. Not alone. Sometimes through committees. Sometimes through advisors. Sometimes through administrative staff. But always nearby. "What exactly are you telling me?" I asked. Thomas folded his hands. "I am telling you that someone has spent a great deal of time learning how authority moves inside this family." The words lingered in the room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Thomas reached into the folder and removed one final sheet. "There is something else." He slid it toward me. Several archive files had been reviewed repeatedly over the last year. One category stood out immediately: historical trust amendments. I stared at the page. Most people focused on current documents. Few ever bothered studying old ones. That detail alone felt important. As I left Thomas's office later that afternoon, one thought refused to leave my mind. Isabel was not improvising. She was not simply taking advantage of opportunities. Someone had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. And for the first time, I began to wonder whether the rest of us were already much later in the story than we realized. 2 days after meeting with Thomas, another unexpected ally entered the story. Her name was Sophia Bennett. I knew of her reputation long before I met her. She was one of the youngest attorneys in the city to earn the trust of several major family offices. And unlike many people who worked around wealth, she had a habit of asking uncomfortable questions. Thomas arranged a private meeting in one of the smaller conference rooms at his firm. The room overlooked the river, and afternoon sunlight reflected against the glass buildings outside. Sophia arrived carrying a thin folder and a notebook. She greeted me politely before taking a seat across the table. "Thomas told me there are concerns involving governance records," she said. I nodded. Concerns is a polite word for it. A faint smile crossed her face before she opened the folder. For the next hour, she reviewed several document requests connected to family trusts, advisory committees, and succession planning. Unlike Thomas, who focused on legal structures, Sophia seemed interested in patterns of behavior. She circled dates, compared timelines, linked people who appeared unrelated at first glance. By the end of the meeting, one conclusion became difficult to ignore. The activity had increased steadily over the previous 2 years. This was not a sudden effort, Sophia said. Someone has been preparing for a future role for a very long time. Hearing those words from a second legal professional made the situation feel more real. After the meeting ended, I returned to the estate with a growing sense that pieces were beginning to fit together. That evening, Ethan knocked on my study door carrying another stack of records. He looked more excited than worried this time. "You need to see this," he said. Together we reviewed several archived communications connected to Foundation committees. Buried inside routine correspondence was a detail neither of us expected. An old governance review conducted years earlier referenced a historical trust amendment. The mention lasted only a few lines before disappearing from the record entirely. "Have you ever heard of this amendment?" Ethan asked. I shook my head. The Harrison family had thousands of legal documents. Yet something about this reference felt different. It was old enough that most people would ignore it and important enough that someone had clearly spent time looking for it. As the evening grew darker outside, I stared at the page resting on my desk. Harrison's notebook, Thomas's concerns, Sophia's analysis, Ethan's discoveries. None of them pointed towards certainty yet, but together they pointed in the same direction. Somewhere inside decades of family history, a forgotten document was waiting. And for reasons I still did not fully understand, I was beginning to believe it might explain why so many people suddenly wanted me out of the way. The breakthrough came from the person everyone underestimated most. 3 nights after Ethan discovered the reference to the forgotten amendment, Harrison appeared outside my study carrying nothing more than a folded piece of paper. He did not knock. He rarely did. He simply stood in the doorway until I looked up from my desk. "You are searching in the wrong place," he said. Then he handed me the note. Written across the paper was a date and a storage reference number. Nothing more. Before I could ask a question, he turned and walked away. The next morning, Ethan and I went to the estate library. The room was quiet except for the ticking of an antique clock above the fireplace. Sunlight filtered through tall windows and stretched across rows of leather-bound volumes. Together, we searched the archive cabinets located behind a hidden panel near the back wall. Most of the records were decades old. Meeting minutes, property transactions, trust revisions. Hours passed before Ethan finally pulled a thin file from a lower drawer. The reference number matched Harrison's note. My pulse quickened. We carried the file to a large reading table and carefully opened it. Inside were copies of correspondence connected to a governance review conducted many years earlier. Attached to the final page was a memorandum referencing the same historical trust amendment Sophia had found. This time, however, there was additional information. The amendment had never been repealed, never replaced, never superseded. Ethan looked at me across the table. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. We both understood the significance immediately. If the amendment remained active, then assumptions made by several people inside the family might be completely wrong. That afternoon, Sophia reviewed the material. By evening, Thomas had examined it as well. Their reactions were remarkably similar. Neither celebrated. Neither made conclusions too quickly. Instead, both became very quiet. "This changes the conversation," Thomas finally said. "Potentially all of it." The following day, invitations were distributed for the annual foundation gathering. Board members, advisors, donors, family representatives. Everyone important would be present. As I reviewed the guest list, I noticed something else. Isabel had arranged several presentations focused on leadership transition and future governance. The timing felt too perfect to be coincidence. She clearly believed the moment she had been preparing for was finally approaching. Across the estate, excitement seemed to grow with each passing hour. Yet beneath that excitement, a different reality was taking shape. Harrison's notebook had revealed the pattern. Ethan had uncovered the missing connections. Sophia and Thomas had confirmed the legal significance. And now, for the first time since this began, I sensed the balance quietly shifting. Not in public, not yet, but soon enough, everyone in the room would be forced to confront a truth they never expected. The annual foundation gathering began just after sunset. By 7 o'clock, the grand ballroom of the Harrison estate was filled with donors, board members, business partners, and longtime family friends. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished floors while servers moved quietly between groups carrying silver trays. From a distance, Everything looked elegant and perfectly organized. Up close, I could feel anticipation hanging in the air. Isabel certainly felt it. She moved confidently through the room, greeting guests with the ease of someone who already believed she belonged at the center of the future. Several people congratulated her before any official announcement had even been made. I noticed the exchanges. More importantly, I noticed that she did not correct them. David remained beside her for most of the evening. His smile looked practiced. His eyes looked tired. Across the ballroom, Victoria spoke with several board members while carefully guiding conversations toward leadership, modernization, and succession. The message was subtle but clear. A new era was coming, and according to many people in that room, Isabel would lead it. I stood near one of the tall windows overlooking the estate grounds. Ethan joined me shortly after arriving. "Everyone seems very confident," he said quietly. I followed his gaze across the ballroom. "Confidence can be useful," I replied. "Sometimes it makes people stop asking questions." Ethan smiled faintly. Near the rear entrance, I spotted Sophia speaking with Thomas. Neither appeared nervous. That detail reassured me. Both had spent days reviewing documents and verifying every detail connected to the amendment. If there had been uncertainty, I would have seen it in their faces. Instead, they appeared calm. The evening progressed through speeches, introductions, and presentations celebrating the Foundation's achievements. Again and again, references to future leadership appeared throughout the program. Each mention seemed to strengthen the assumptions already spreading through the room. Isabel accepted compliments gracefully. Board members nodded approvingly. Several donors appeared pleased by the apparent direction of the organization. Then came the final portion of the evening, the part everyone had been waiting for. Chairs were arranged facing a presentation platform at the front of the ballroom. Conversations faded as guests found their seats. Thomas stepped toward a podium carrying a folder beneath one arm. The room gradually became silent. Isabel straightened in her chair. David exhaled slowly. Victoria folded her hands with quiet satisfaction. Around us, more than 100 people focused their attention toward the stage. Yet while they prepared to hear the future they expected, only a handful of people in the ballroom knew that another future was about to be revealed instead. Thomas adjusted his glasses and opened the folder resting on the podium. The ballroom became completely silent. More than 100 guests watched as he reviewed several introductory remarks regarding the Foundation's history and future. Isabel sat perfectly still. From where I was seated, I could see confidence in her posture. Around her, board members appeared equally certain about what would happen next. Then Thomas reached the section everyone had been waiting for. Before discussing future leadership, he said, "There is an existing governance matter that must first be addressed." Several people exchanged confused glances. That was not part of the program they expected. Thomas removed a document from the folder. During a recent archival review, a historical trust amendment was verified and confirmed to remain fully active. The room grew quieter. If that was possible, Isabel's smile faded slightly. David looked toward Victoria. Thomas continued reading. The amendment had been created decades earlier during a major restructuring of the Harrison Family Trust. Its purpose was simple: to ensure continuity during periods of transition. According to its provisions, ultimate authority over certain governance decisions could not be transferred through committee recommendations, succession plans, or board preferences alone. Those powers remained vested in a single designated individual unless voluntarily relinquished. A murmur spread through the ballroom. I watched confusion move across faces that had seemed so certain only moments before. Then Thomas spoke the words that changed everything. "That individual is Eleanor Harrison." Silence followed. Genuine silence. Not polite silence. Not uncertainty. Shock. Across the room, several guests stared openly. Others looked back toward me as if trying to reconcile two completely different versions of reality. Isabel remained motionless. David lowered his eyes. Victoria's expression tightened for the first time all evening. Thomas calmly continued reviewing the amendment. Every major governance transition required my approval. Every significant restructuring required my authorization. None of those provisions had ever been removed. None had ever expired. For years, people had mistaken visibility for authority. They had assumed that because my voice had become quieter, my influence had disappeared. They had confused perception with fact. When Thomas finally closed the folder, No further explanation was necessary. The documents spoke for themselves. Slowly, I rose from my chair. The room watched. I thought about the family dinner, the missing reports, the meetings held without me, the conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Then I looked toward Isabel. The future of this family matters deeply to me, I said calmly. That is why it should never be built on assumptions. No anger, no triumph, only truth. Later that night, after the guests departed and the ballroom emptied, I walked through the quiet halls of the estate. Everything looked exactly as it had before, yet something fundamental had changed. For months, perhaps years, people had acted as though I was fading into the background. The reality was much simpler. I had never lost control. They had only stopped paying attention.